Last time we worked on the 4runner, we removed the stock bumper. Since then, I did a few housekeeping things. I removed the brackets, reinstalled the bolts, and cut the exhaust to tuck it in. Today on the Project Nomad, we are continuing to work on this rear bumper for the 3rd gen 4runner. So the game plan right now is to create the foundation of the rear bumper, and the way that I figure we're going to be doing that is by creating mounts that are just going to be right around here for the frame, leading up to the main cross member or the main tube that's going to create most of the rear structure for the bumper. That's going to go right around here. So that's pretty much what I'm going to be doing right now. I think the best way for me to actually create the mounts here is going to be using a 4-inch, quarter-inch thick flat strap that's just going to go out 20 inches and be mounted right around here. And it gives me enough room that I can put a rear support for the tow hitch that'll eventually go around here. And it's long enough that it is giving me enough room to have adjustability for the rear main tube to slide either further out or further in relation to the door, so that I have a little bit more material blocking off the body from making contact with anything, whether it be another car, a post, or another rock. But that's just kind of the idea that I currently have. And just drilling like 2 holes so that I can have self-tapping bolts just cut right through like I did with rock sliders, just for temporary fixing purposes. But other than that, let me just cut out the plates and let me show you what I mean by putting 2 bolts through here. I'm using a chop saw here, but you can honestly use an angle grinder with a cutoff wheel. I have the plates now mounted up, and this is what I mean by just drilling 2 holes so that I can mount it up, or a few holes to mount it up. And this is going to be the basis of how the rest of this bumper is going to be made. 2 bolts right here is perfectly fine for the purposes of fitting up everything and getting everything in place and actually making this bumper. Underneath is where most of the pulling or holding strength is going to be. I plan on putting another piece of 4-inch wide, quarter-inch strap just all the way from the back all to the very tip here, and welding it all together so I have a very secure solid frame to work with. But with this on, I want to now deal with the cross member that's gonna stretch between both of these. To get the correct dimensions for this cross member, I'm measuring the hatch's width and adding a few more fractions of an inch to either side, so when I weld up the uprights for the wings, it'll fit in the gap between the hatch and the body perfectly. I got my 2 pieces of tube steel cut out. This 2x2 tube is gonna be a rear cross member that supports the tow hitch in the back whenever I get to it, but it also will act as a bit of a support for the rest of the bumper as well, and the frame. This second piece here, the shinier, cleaner one, is actually going to be the main cross member and rear portion of the rear bumper. I already have it notched so that I can just slide on the 2 plates that I already have there, and I can just actually French this in and make sure everything is tied in well. But with that, I am pretty much set. The positioning of the cross member is actually important here. Putting it too far in, the hatch actually hits the tube and it also doesn't get protected enough. But putting it too far out, the departure angle suffers and it's unnecessarily big for a vehicle of this size. So trying to find a happy medium of both being tight enough to the body while being spaced out enough to be useful is the key in a build like this. Now that I have my spacing figured out for this rear tube, I just kind of marked it off on the plates on both sides, so I can just cut this off and trim off the excess material, so whenever I get to the next portion it isn't as bad, or I don't have to do as much work trimming everything and pull everything separate. I did also start working on the bottom portion for this, and I'll show you that in a second. I got the plates that are on the inside of the frame trimmed up so that that's all the material I'm going to need from them, and it's starting to shape into the departure angle that I'm going to be having when this is all said and done. I wanted to cap the ends off and build this corner up, so what I ended up doing was cut off a piece of plate, again 1/4 inch, so that I can just slide it in something like this, so that it builds the bumper up to where the recess in the body panel is, and it just gives me a lot more options to deal with. And with the door closed, you can see that I do have a decent amount of distance on either side of the metal here, so it won't necessarily interfere with anything. I think the goal for me right now would be to finish up the bottom portion so that I can shape it into the angle that I need to, so it'll line up right around here. Then I can deal with the inside cross member and the main tube in the back here. And after that, we pretty much have the foundation of our rear bumper set up. I wanted to figure out, or just have a good guess on where these holes are on the frame relative to this plate, because I'm just gonna butt up the adjoining plate that's here on the bottom up against this. So with that, I just kind of took this right angle and tried to pinpoint where it's at. And what my eye is telling me, it's roughly at 1.5 inches away from this plate. So I can draw a line on the plate that's gonna go here, 1.5 inches all the way across, and then start figuring out where the distance is. And everything's gonna be based on this hole because this one is the furthest. So these are the plates that I have for the bottom portions, and like I was saying, I want to find out where the holes would most likely line up. And from where I have it, it's basically going to be 1.5 inches from one side inwards, and that's where the line's going to start. And I'm going to drag that line all the way across so that I have all the holes pretty much on a line. And if I'm off by a little bit, or the holes are not exactly together in that orientation, I'm just going to open up the holes so that they can compensate here and not onto the frame. So the way that I'm actually getting the distances for the holes here on the frame to the plate material on the table is I'm getting this flat strap and then just lining it up on the frame, pressing it against this flat portion here, and then marking it off where the holes are, and then having notch marks along this flat strap that I can easily transfer onto the workpiece. I made some progress on the bottom plates as of right now. I just simply took a 1/8 drill bit and drilled straight through the marks that I made. And then I got onto my drill press and bored them out into a bigger diameter so that the bolts will just easily slide in and out. I got the plates made up and bolted on both sides, and they look pretty good. I do need to open this one up a little bit more so that this one can shift a little bit to the left, but that's not that bad. All the holes seem to be lined up, and that's a good thing. But you can see here that I can actually make a mark on where the frame ends so that I can bend this upwards to match this contour, and then have it all tacked together so that the mounts for the frame are actually all together as a solid piece. I got the bottom plates formed up, just cut a notch right here and then just mounted it up and then pressed it upwards. That's all I did. I will be trimming this so that it will not interfere with this sitting correctly. Other than that, I think it's pretty much set. I'm just gonna tack this stuff up and then show you guys how it looks in the morning. So it's been a few days now of welding and grinding just to get the core of this bumper ready, but it's pretty much done. Everything is welded and put together, and I believe it's set to go and for me to start working on the rest of it. And here it is. This is the core of the bumper, basically how it's going to be mounting to the frame, the hitch receiver, the main bar that goes across, as well as the support for the hitch receiver, as well as it providing support for the rest of the core here, as well as the standoffs ready for me to start working on the wings of the bumpers. Everything's pretty much welded on completely, and I did some initial grinds so that it's somewhat smooth and it won't immediately start cutting me if I brush against it. So if you like this type of content and would like to keep following me on this rear bumper build for my 4Runner, please like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, be safe and tread lightly.